Ladies and gentlemen, high-stakes chess is a pretty rare thing, particularly in a one-on-one matchup. Yes, you can bet your friend that you will defeat them in a game or a match for 20 bucks, but really, the World Chess Championship is the only place we get a one-on-one match for a lot of money. That is until yesterday, July 26, 2022, as Sagar Shah of ChessBase India, along with a massive, amazing team of people, put together a live deathmatch. They had a stage. The players wore boxing outfits with, actual gloves. And then they played a timed match for $10,000 US. We're talking about Anish Giri and Vidit Gujarati. It was an epic event live in this arena, and I'm gonna take you through 11 games of action in about 30 minutes, all right? It's gonna be fast-paced, enjoy yourselves, have a great time. We begin with a blindfold game of chess. This game was played blindfolded. And it was a relatively tame affair, okay? This is the first game of the match. It was a semi-Slav, it was a Miran, and it wasn't anything to write home about. So I'm just gonna keep clicking the forward arrow, and I'm gonna show you the major moments of the game. First moment is right here, right? We have kind of an imbalanced pawn structure. Black's got a 3-on-2 on the queen side. And white is going to try to maybe get f4, e5. Black is gonna maybe try to get counterplay like this. Well, let's see what happens, all right? Vidit is playing in the middle of the board, and Anish is kind of fighting off that knight, and now he sacrifices his c-pawn with the idea in the future to win back the e4 pawn, and really there's not a whole lot to write home about. This is a totally equal position. However, the players are blindfolded, right? So at some point, they might forget where something is, and you'll notice that Vidit has an advantage. How do you have an advantage in a position where something is totally symmetrical? Well, you have a very active rook. That rook is a menace, patrolling not just the entire 7th rank, which is very important in endgames, but also a major weakness, and he's preventing Giri from moving. 2 rooks on the 7th now, making this very difficult to defend, not trading all the rooks, right? And impossible for black to really move because that a6 pawn needs to be protected. Now, what is the evaluation of this position? The evaluation of this position is a resounding 0.00. But that doesn't change the fact that moves have to be played, right? I mean, the players are blindfolded, and finally something goes wrong. It looks like everything is fine, but Anish Giri here, seeing that Vidit was going for the g6 pawn, makes the move rook to c3. And in all piece endgames, like knight, bishop, rook kind of endgames, there is the question of, if everything gets traded, is it a winning pawn endgame, or is it a drawn pawn endgame? What is going on? And Vidit finds a very well-timed check, and another very well-timed check, and this endgame is winning for him with the move king to g5. Anish blunders a rook simplification, 43 moves into not seeing the game at all. They were both blindfolded. The reason this is winning is that if you count the race, white is going to win it. King a3, king f5, here, g5, a5, and white wins. White wins the race by, really, I mean, it's 1 square, technically, because if black's pawn was here, it would queen. So white technically wins the race by 1 square, and also prevents the pawn from moving forward. This is a totally winning endgame, and Vidit strikes first. They drew 2 more games, and the last game of the first format was like weird, different format of a game. This is chess 960. The entire back row of pieces is shuffled. The only rules are the fact that the bishops have to be on opposite colors, and the kings need to be between the rooks. So the way you castle queenside here is this rook needs to go here. That is how you castle queenside, okay? To castle kingside is going to be a big endeavor. The king has to be able to go there, and the rook needs to be able to go here. So you would need to clear out all of these pieces. It's much easier to castle queenside. Now, Fischer random leads to all sorts of really strange stuff, such as bringing your queen out on the 3rd move and controlling your opponent's development. And the thing about every pawn move you make is you might potentially be blocking in some of your pieces. Fischer random, it's actually maybe even considered to be better to go with black. It's like better to start with the black pieces, right? And so Anish in this game was already by move 10, mildly overextended. That pawn on e5, a little bit suspicious, not very clear if it's an asset or a liability. The engine doesn't like it, and Vidit very quickly started taking advantage of the dark squares. Notice pawns kind of spread out thin, not very good, not very good development, and Anish, already under the pressure of several pieces here, tries to fight back, but really ends up just down a pawn. I mean, black just has 7 pawns and white has 6. White has kind of a scattered king safety. And the thing about Fischer random is in 20-25 moves, it's going to start looking like a normal game of chess. So you see, he tries to get the bishops off the board. He protects his b7 pawn. And maybe at some point, he is going to castle. And by some point, I mean right now. You see, that is how you castle short. It's a very trippy looking move. but that is how you would castle short. Now, Vidit also here can castle like this. That is a horrible decision because you will be castling directly into bulldozers. So he goes this way. And once the dust settles, Anish is still down a pawn with a wide open king. So Anish is in serious trouble, and Vidit has the option to go directly for a king attack. Vidit, did I say Anish or Vidit? But actually what ends up happening is this king gets completely safe. So Vidit missed his chance. And I think his chance was somewhere around here. He had like his largest advantage of the game. He apparently had to go f6, give this pawn away completely, and then try to like destroy the center. And the idea of destroying the center is the fact that like this bishop can get active, right? The bishop can get active. Now the king has no shelter. But because he played a little bit too slowly and the king was able to run and the pawn was able to be won, this endgame is holdable. And for a second time in a row, we see Anish in a situation where he's defending the unpleasant side of an endgame, right? I mean, Black's king is completely cut off, but Vidit finds a way in this game to activate his king, block it with the bishop. The king and the bishop sort of do a little bit of a swap, and Anish's pawn weaknesses ultimately come back to bite, as by the 70th move, the king found safety, and the pawns were lost, and Vidit went on to win this game in 72 moves. Took a very long time. I told you we are not studying the intrinsics. Sorry, is that even a word? Did I just make a word up in this recap? But it took a very long time, and Vidit got the job done. Vidit early on took a 3-1 lead. But what do we know about 3-1 leads? They're safe, unless you're the Golden State Warriors. So we move ahead now to the players have to play a blitz segment. Okay, they played one rapid game, they played some chess 960, they played blindfold. Now we're in a blitz segment, and this is game number 7. Vidit begins the game with a standard kind of ready. It very quickly becomes a bit of an obscure King's Indian defense. It's a fianchetto King's Indian, but Black has played e5, knight d7, so not playing like a traditional knight c6 setup. And Anish took really great risks in this game. And when I say really great, I mean, yeah, like really great. Like he played h5, and then he played h4. He just sacrificed his h-pawn. The thing is, Anish has got to do something. We're 6 games into this match. He hasn't won a single game. All right, he's on -2. He's lost 2 games, made 4 draws. So he sacrifices 1 pawn. He gives away his light squared bishop completely. And the idea is to start dancing on the dark squares, right? He wants to bring his knight to e6, f4, here, all being fought for. And Vidit needs to also begin fighting on the dark squares and tries to remove the dark squared bishop from the board. Then he trades the queens, then he trades the bishops, and he grabs himself a pawn. Vidit is just a pawn up. And the craziest thing is he might be 2 pawns up because he's going to win one of these pawns. And that's actually exactly what happens. He trades rooks, takes a4, brings back the knight to c3. He's just up 2 pawns. He has 6, Anish has 4. However, Anish has substantial amounts of compensation. He has compensation in the form of very active pieces. You will notice that the black rook on d2 is an extreme menace. And so Anish keeps trying, right? He keeps poking, keeps prodding. Here, Vidit had to grab the pawn on b7, take the check, and run. Like he had to try to escape and evaluate that there's no weaknesses here and just play a4 and literally just run to make a queen. Not easy to do. Not easy to leave the king completely alone like this. He tries to get the king some breathing room first, but the way he does it by putting the knight, now the king's in some trouble. All right, and Anish makes him pay. There's dancing. All right, the king is being bullied around. Now suddenly Anish has 2 knights and 2 pawns. Now the knights have backup, and that's basically what ends up happening. The 2 pawns simplify down and just start marching, and suddenly the king. But you'll notice here, king c2, knight b4 would have deflected the king away from the rook. The king has to give away the rook, g2, and both sides queen, but only one side has a follow-up check. So Anish, from the depths of potentially a 3rd loss, emerges, creates a good amount of counterplay, and suddenly checkmates Vidit's king in the center of the board. So he struck back. That's his first win. It's now 4-3. All right, we move to the next game. 4-3, can Anish build on this momentum? We have a gioco pianissimo, probably the most calm game that the players can have. Oh, it's not calm. Never mind. All right, Black castles after playing g5, now plays g4, looking for a kingside play. Look at this, queen g5, you'll love to see it. This is beautiful blitz game being played here. Knight f4, knight f5 check played by Anish, takes. And for a very brief moment, Black is a pawn up. Now, does the pawn up actually serve as an advantage, or will white just immediately get a massive amount of counterplay? Well, that's only up for Vidit to decide as he plays the move h5. He is just throwing hands on the king side here with Anish. We have FG, HG, and here comes F5, and that's it. I mean, look at this position. The queen surrounded by the pawns, the knight, the two knights, actually. The rook's potentially going to do battle on the F and the H files. Anish trying to fight back. Here comes the rook. Oh, beautiful move. Suffocating the rook. The rook's got to go. We trade E4, and the pawns just walk straight into the VIP lounge of the club, holding hands. That's it. You are not going to be able to defend your king and deal with two connected passed pawns. All right? It's like when the Peaky Blinders first went into Sabini's club. I don't remember what season that was. 2? Was that season 3? Season 2? Really great show, though. Highly recommend. It's that first time they just beat everybody up. Spoilers. Yeah, that's like what's going on right now. All right? And Anish tries his best, but Vidit, I mean, just look at this position. The queen, the rook, the knight, just everybody working together. King hunted out, and rook h2 seals the deal as the king is just going to get mated. I mean, there's just absolutely nowhere for the king to go. A resounding victory in the 8th game. Vidit doesn't let Anish build any momentum. He now moves on to his 3rd win, and he is up 5-3. Now, the next game was a draw. The next game that I'm showing you is the final Blitz game. This is a very, very, very important game because if Vidit can win this game, he has a 3-game lead going into Bullet. All right? So we have a Spanish, we have an anti-Berlin, we have one of the main lines of the anti-Berlin, and a very solid structure by Vidit. I mean, he basically puts out the exact same pawn structure on the king side that he did last game, and it's like, all right, Anish, you want to beat me? You got to come get me. DE, that pawn on E5 could potentially be a weakness. Queen E2 with the intention of playing knight to C4. Doesn't let me play knight to C4, but I'm going to play B3. Rook D1, I'm still going knight C4. You can take me, that's fine. But notice how all of black's pawns are on dark squares. That means that if white is able to break through on the light squares, white is going to be having a grand old time, right? And that's what Anish is now trying to do. There's the F3 move, GF, knight F3. You'll remember that in the anti-Berlin, when Hikaru castled short against Fabiano Caruana in the first round of the candidates a couple of months ago, he got into trouble with his king on the king side. Do you not remember that game? That's absolutely fine. You should remember that game, though. I mean, you probably don't remember, like, a lot of things, but that was an important game. And so now Anish has this really nice situation, right? He's got the king side attack, rook f5, bishop e5, and the attack is just bulldozing. This is almost the exact same way, not quite, but in almost an exact same way that Fabiano applied pressure on Hikaru throughout their game. And what ends up happening is this. I mean, Anish is up a pawn. Vidit has a very weak king. And as you might imagine, something's going to give here. And the threat of the trade into the endgame, the pawns are falling. The pawns are falling in conjunction with the black king being mercilessly bullied. And the king ends up succumbing to the checks. G7 is also a check. Knight G6, and now a beautiful move. Bishop takes H4. Black has nothing. If you trade queens, I will promote. I am promoting on the next move anyway. Really, queen f4 checks the only remaining move, and then this. Bishop h4. Anish has won the final game of Blitz, and it is a 1-game match. Let's go to the first game of the Bullet. Again, a momentum-building spot for Anish. Can he do it? Knight f3. We have another King's Indian. King's Indian has been serving quite well. Anish sort of playing sidelines of the King's Indian. Bishop g4 is one of the lines. A5 to control the dark squares on the queen side. And now look at that move. Oh my, h5 is a very provocative move. The idea of h5, if bishop takes g4, knight g4 is actually very reasonable. Maybe hg, but the point is that you want to defend on the g4 square. All right, we kick me out, knight c5, and at some point, white's going to have to start making pawn progress. There it is. But the knight goes to a4. And Anish is playing super provocative chess. Here comes the move f5. Objectively speaking, black is lost. You give Stockfish this position with white, it absolutely vaporizes humanity, and there's absolutely no hope of humanity returning. With the move b5. Yeah, b5 is kind of hard to play in a bullet game, you know? In a bullet game, you're looking more like at pawn breaks, but the second that happens, now the bishop is alive. Now the bishop survives and is able to get traded, and black is still kind of harassing white on the queen side. There's not really a whole lot. I mean, Vidit is really doing a good job here, trying to just break apart the queen side. King's Indian is always kind of a king side, queen side battle. Knight f6 takes, knight d5. Uh-oh. Whoa, now the center's falling for white. Vidit trying to just, oh my goodness, look at this move. E4 to bring in the bishop. Knight e3 and bishop d4 on the way. Here comes king h1. Takes, queen, wait a second, why didn't he take this? He didn't take this because back rank mate. Oh my goodness. Lost in all this is literally a lurking back rank mate. So after knight e3, queen e4, Anish just trades and he's just a piece up. Vidit succumbing to the tactics now in this crazy scramble, and Vidit's just down a piece. He's just down a full piece, and there's nothing he can do as Anish brings in all his pieces and delivers the final blow with knight to g3 check. It's a tied match. It has not been a tied match since the match began. It was 0-0. It took 11 games for the match to be close again. It is now 5.5, 5.5. The next game was a draw. We moved to game number 13, all squared away. All right, Vidit goes knight f3. Anish sees what's working. We have another King's Indian on the board. All right, so Anish is going to keep trying to pound away with these King's Indians. You'll notice that this game looks very similar. This time Anish gets h5 and actually manages to trade his bishop. Last game, he played h5 straight away, and something like this happened. So we have bishop e2, queen e2, and this sort of a position. Now, there are no light-squared bishops. Still, it's a King's Indian, so b4 and f5 and f4 and c6 are all on the table, right? So here comes f5 and f4. This is like exactly what you want in a King's Indian. Bishop c5, knight c5. There's b4, right? Knight back to d7. Rook c1. The King's Indian is an age-old battle between whether or not white will break through on the queen side or whether black checkmates white on the king side. That's it, all right? b6, all right? You'll notice that Anish is slowly building up the forces for an attack, but he also has a little bit of pull on the queen side. He's like, yo, what's up? You thought you were doing something over here, but now I'm going back. Here comes knight f6, and at some point, I'm coming in with my f and my pawns on the king side. Unless Vidit blocks. Unless Vidit blocks everything. So right before Vidit blocks everything, Anish sacrifices the pawn. Says, you can take it. My bishop is open. This is going to move, and this is going to be open, and this is going to be open. Very tough position. And now the tables have turned officially. It is now back to equality. Anish is trying to take his first lead in the match. Oh my goodness. What better way to take your first lead in the match than to sack your rook? Now, it doesn't have to be taken. He could have taken the knight. But gf3, knight d2. Here comes the queen. This is a terrifying position. This is a terrifying position. And now you are in a losing endgame. Black has a bishop versus a knight and an outside pass pawn. That's all you need. White has a damaged structure. He tries to trade, but you can't. You can't defend against c and h. Your position is not strong enough to defend against the c and the h pawn at the same time. And that is exactly what proves to be the downfall as the bishop takes the knight and black wins by virtue of the passed pawns. Anish Giri has taken his first lead in the match. It is now 7-6 after 13 games. We go to game number 14. Can Vidit strike back? I mean, this is terrible. When you're up 2, when you're close to being up 3, now you are down 1, the match is getting away from you. Panic is starting to set in, all right? Anish starts with d4. We've seen Anish bullying in the King's Indian, but with white, he's going for a London. Vidit himself is playing a kind of a King's Indian style. And this game gets exciting quickly as the players have a big exchange on e5. And the battle kind of turns to this d file and the pawn on d5. Bishop e6, queen a4 hitting the knight. The knight moves. Rook c1. Queen trade, knight g5 looking for the trade. And now we have this position. Okay. Who's better here and why? White is better here because white has the bishop pair and black has a little bit of an exploitable pawn structure. What am I talking about? b4. Great move. Black's options. Trade pawns, allow the rook to infiltrate. Horrible. But if you go here, now I continue to bully your knight, you got no moves. I mean, you got like rook e7, but at some point, I'm going to try to apply some more pressure on that queen side. I think he could have done it a little bit better. I think here, even c4 by white was really strong to just try to break down the entire pawn wall. Engine also likes e4, sacrificing the pawn completely to get rook d7 ideas. But bishop a6 is a nice way to do it, and Anish, right, trying to kind of expand. e4, beautiful move, with the intention, if d takes e4 is played, rook d8, knight d8, rook d1, I mean, bishop back to c4 at some moment. Like, white is doing very well. Bishop pair and better structure. So Anish is well on his way to winning a second game, and he wins an exchange, and that's it. That's just it. Anish is now up 2 games. All he has to do is expand the queen side. Now, in this game, there was a transmission error. So the game that got sent to me had the final position, like where they stopped the recording, was here. But what I don't understand is, in the actual video, there's no pawn. So if anybody could tell me what actually happened in the game, because they cropped the cameras wrong, I don't know what happened to the pawn. The pawn just disappeared. So in the game they sent me, there is a pawn, but there actually is no pawn in the real game. And then Anish just went on to win this endgame. Rook versus knight is winning. I mean, the knight is just too slow. The knight cannot prevent all of this. Yeah, I don't know where this pawn went. Went somewhere. I don't know where it went. I almost feel like it was like sacrificed somehow, but I don't really know how, because this was the position. And then it was like knight d6, and then the game went on. Yeah, Anish takes a 2-game lead. Anish is now up 8-6. Match has like 15 minutes left. It's looking like it's just going to be a wrap. It's anything but a wrap. The second that Anish takes a 2-game lead, we get a, I don't know, Vidit, by the way, changes his opening, first of all. He doesn't play d4. We get a Najdorf. Vidit playing a total Najdorf sideline. Queen to d3. Anish plays bishop d7. And I mean, we're in like mega sideline territory. Both sides castling, rooks get developed, and now something absolutely insane happens. Queen a5 on the board, normal move, bishop back to d2. Knight b4 attacks the queen. Knight g4 attacks the queen. Queen c5, normal move, unpinning yourself, right? We have queen g3. And in this position, Anish Giri, up 2 games in this match, plays the move bishop c6. That just hangs a knight. That bishop used to guard the knight. It no longer guards the knight. Now, if you're playing a timed match, what you do here is you play. You bleed 3-4 minutes off the clock. All right, you're up 2. Why give your opponent any opportunity to get more time in the time bank, right? I mean, so Anish moved. No, Anish resigns. What? That's crazy. I mean, you got to burn the clock. There's like 14 minutes. You got to burn as much time as possible, right? No, Anish just resigns after hanging the knight. It's now a 1-game match again. And now in the next game, Vidit has black. It's now 8-7. So we get a very tame opening here. I mean, neither side confrontational. King's Indian-esque by black, but really just kind of a weird sideline. Knight bd2, bishop c3, which is just a very, very solid opening by both players. I mean, really not a whole lot going on here in game number 16. If anyone's better, it's black, because black has very clear target on the queen side. And this pawn is actually not as weak as it looks. It can always even be sacrificed to damage white structure. So Vidit just has to build up on the dark squares. It's going to be a bishopless game. Queen, both knights, and both rooks. Knight d4 is coming. Knight f4 is coming. And yeah, I mean, Vidit has clearly rattled Anish by taking his knight in the last game. Look at this position. I mean, this is beautiful. The knights gloriously standing. And Anish just desperately trying to defend against, you know, infiltration like this. And here comes a4. I told you that pawn was not as weak as it looked. It is a Trojan horse. If you take that pawn, the rooks immediately fly in down the b file. So he goes b4 and tries to get rid of the pawn somehow in this fashion. But yeah, black is just a pawn up. And it's worse than that. Black is now going to... Oh, look at that move. Look at that move. Fork is coming. If you take, that's a fork backwards. So Anish has almost no time, and he's just down 2 pawns. And look at this. I mean, the rook pressuring, the knight pressuring, hitting this, hitting this. There is a discovered check lurking. The a pawn is 3 squares away from becoming a queen. The evaluation is -5, and Vidit ends this game in style. Hitting on the king, right? Like, hitting on the king. Vidit was not hitting on the king. Vidit was trying... I don't even know what I was trying to say. Whatever, you get what I'm saying. He's trying to break down the king's defenses, and I think Vidit played this game at like 97% accuracy. Cold-blooded by Vidit Gujarati, gets to the king. Anish tries to defend himself, but it's futile. And actually, look, there were some very fun tactics toward the end. The pawn is a square away from queening. G4 threatens a mate. So Anish sacrifices the queen with the intention after this to be able to escape, right? So that is no longer mate. So c8, if you go here, black is no longer winning. But black is able to afford a quiet move here. Rook to g3. For a second time in this match, we see a new queen being promoted, unable to actually participate in the game. That happened toward the beginning of the video, right? When the pawn queen, but was actually unable to join the attack. That was the first game that Vidit went on to lose. You cannot prevent queen h4. Vidit just won 2 games in a row. Ladies and gentlemen, there is 1 game remaining that decides the match. That's it. This is the final game. You could not have scripted this match in any closer fashion. You could not have scripted it any better. 8-6, 8 out of 16. 8 out of 16. Both sides just winning 2 games in a row in the bullet. This is crazy. All right, knight f3. All right, this time a fianchetto, a reverse London, a double fianchetto versus a reverse London. D3, knight d2, King's Indian attack style. Knight e5. Players choosing a very solid approach here. a5, a4. We're not going to have any shenanigans. And dark squared bishops will not get traded. And this becomes the early pawn structure of the game. So what does Vidit want? Vidit wants to play g4, f5, f6. Anish wants to fight back on the queen side. It's a very interesting and imbalanced position. ba, rook a4. Look at this. Anish has arrived first. Okay, what Vidit should have done apparently is when b5 happened, he shouldn't have just played g4, f5. Apparently, there was a better way to handle it. Allowing black to win valuable time on the queen side is not good. If you just play f5 here, like Vidit does, a3 is apparently very strong. And then moves like knight back to d7, bishop trading on c5, queen b6 in the future. But it's a bullet game, and both players' heart rates are like through the roof. So ab3 played, he trades, and now he plants his bishop between the pawns, right? So not the approach the engine loves, but still very practical, because now if white were to play f6, it would be a totally different story. There is no bishop here getting locked away, right? The bishop is standing very tall, very handsome on the g5 square. So knight d4 looking to defend the attack, threaten this pawn, threaten this pawn, maybe go to f3, c5. The knight now gallops into d6, but the black knight is ready to go to d5, and the black bishop standing tall and handsome. e3, king h1, this bishop is now out of the game. Move 25, almost no time remaining, very complicated position. Queen to g5, queen to f3, knight back to d7 attacking the pawn, defending the pawn, ef. Knight f5, bishop f5, rook f5, queen goes back. Where is white's attack? We were promised an attack. But if you cannot break apart a king with pawns, you are certainly not going to break apart a king with a rook or with a queen. This is the only other piece that can get involved in the attack. But what about this bishop? What is that bishop doing? Spoiler alert, it's doing nothing. And after g6 and the removal of the rook, Anish grabs a pawn, and now Anish is just a pawn up, and there is no attack. Or is there? Anish should not have done that. He should have been patient for one move. If Anish had retreated his bishop and then taken on e5, he would have won this game effortlessly. But he blunders. Rook e3. Takes. Oh my goodness, the bishop has come alive. Anish Giri is now probably losing this endgame. 2 bishops versus a rook is winning 8 to 9 times out of 10 against the rook. Okay, the rook just can't fight against 2 bishops and other pawns. Okay, the pawn is promoting, but it's not, because it will be blockaded. You can create all these tricks. Bishop takes rook, there's promotion, but this. Vidit gets to the pawn and now has 2 bishops versus rook and 1 pawn. This endgame is only winnable if you're playing with white. And both sides have about 10 seconds. All right, gh, rook h5. But Anish makes it very close, because now he has 2 passed pawns. If the rook somehow runs away to safety, somewhere to the a file, and the pawns start marching up the board, nobody can stop them. So white has to monitor the pawns, maybe get to this pawn, maybe push a pawn of his own. Maybe Anish has gotten this close enough that it's a draw. Here comes his king. The rook bullies the king. The rook bullies the king. Vidit's still trying to play for a win, trying to find the win. Where is the win? Rook goes to safety. Oh, here's the win. I'm getting to the c4 pawn, like this. Check. Oh, you just don't have the coordination. And the more time you waste, the faster my pawns come. Here comes rook e1, bishop f2. Oh, he blunders! No, it's not a blunder. Oh my goodness. Oh, it's a check. All right, it's a check. Let's move the king. Bishop goes to b8. Wait, what? Wait, what? I think here they actually missed a move. Oh, this is very funny. Here they missed a move. Here, after king e6, it was bishop e2, rook g1, and then bishop b8. And then it was rook b1. Because bishop b8, he wouldn't have just hung 2 bishops. It was bishop e2, rook g1, and then bishop b8. And then he hung his bishop. So he blundered an x-ray. And that is what decided this match. And Anish Giri very slowly but surely expanded forward, like this with his 2 pawns and his rook, and he prevented white from moving forward. Pawns went forward like this. Rook versus bishop is not the same as rook versus 2 bishops. And Vidit tried to bring his bishops apart so the rook could not get to them, but accidentally put his bishop on the same line as his king. And that is ultimately the blunder that sealed the game. And this was the final position. As the crowd erupted, you could not have made this match any closer. As Anish Giri wins the first place prize, which I believe is like $7,000. And I think Vidit won 3, roughly. Could be mistaken. But actually, Anish gave away the extra money back to a foundation in India for the development of chess. And yeah, a super exciting head-to-head match. I hope we see more of these kind of live-style esports events in the future. Shout out to ChessBase India and Sagar Shah in particular for putting this on, but everybody who was involved as well. Commentators, Amruta, Sagar's wife, and just everybody of the ChessBase India team. Figured I would make a recap for all y'all. And yeah, we got through 11 games in 31 minutes. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. Get out of here.